what happens when you overthrow a government without having a real, viable solution in place for an alternative, because Assad has kept all of the, he's a 10% minority oppressing a 90% majority in terms of population for rule. And the majority that's been sort of oppressed has never been allowed to really take senior government positions or things of power where they could actually, viably take over, which if you're a strong man is intelligent. That's what you would do if that's the way you want to run your country. So in that sense, you have the U.S. supporting the ground forces, which were then largely made of Kurds. So then you had the Turks attacking the Kurds because the groups on the ground in Syria were seen as terrorist groups inside Turkey and a threat to Erdogan. So we've seen strikes cross-border for that. At the same time, the other NATO ally, the United States, is then backing those ground forces in the fight against ISIS. And then you have the Syrians and their backers also fighting against ISIS, but then you have the militias there also fighting against the United States. So the entire geostrategic picture in both countries is what I would call an unmitigated shit show, for lack of a better term, right? So that's what's been going on, really going between both places. So we had ground forces in both cases where we had special operations troops on the ground in both Syria and Iraq who were doing a majority of the conventional fighting backed by air power. Israel doesn't have that in Gaza. And we've already seen, I saw a report today that I think 9% of the infrastructure has been struck and is uninhabitable in total in Gaza. Never mind the number of civilian casualties, everything else
Sorry,
that's being
what
broadcast.
percentage? What percentage?
A couple of reports I saw that overall, when they were doing some aerial photographs, aerial analysis looked about 9% of the structures overall had been hit in some form or fashion. So if those numbers remain true or somewhere around there, right, it speaks, and the civilian casualties you're seeing, it speaks to the fact this cannot be done completely from the air. So unless, and again, this is all everything I'm saying is predicated us again still because the Israelis have not come out and said they're changing their mind on what the goal is to quote demilitarize Hamas. If that's the goal, whether it's achievable or not, it's a separate conversation. That means you have to go in on the ground, find, again, we've been talking about this for days, finding all the weapons caches, anything that's infrastructure related that would allow them to do what they did again. You can't achieve that with limited special operations direct action raids, and you can't achieve that from the air alone unless you're planning on leveling the entire area of Gaza, which is simply also not feasible or possible. So, yeah, I still don't see how you get away with that. And then whether or not it's limited to just northern Gaza, again, if the goal remains demilitarization of Hamas, and we're seeing rockets flying from southern Gaza, it's not just from the north, it's clear the stockpiles don't just exist there. So the only part that's unclear to me is, again, I mentioned it before, if you go into northern Gaza, you clear out Gaza City, however long that takes, blood and treasure, right? We'll put that aside for a second. Now you still have Khan Yunis and everything else to the south. You occupy, you go do whatever you got to do, you clear it out. Then what are you going to do? You're going to occupy, then go south and try to clear Khan Yunis. What do you do with the 2.2 million people that are currently wedged between Wadi Gaza and the wall? And then you've got a coast on one side, you've got a wall on the other, and then you've got a city that you've just cleared to your rear. Do you allow a large million-plus civilian populace to then move to your flanks around you and occupy a city behind you? From a military perspective, I've still got some questions. John or some of the others may have, a thought on that. And then again, we talked about post-governance afterwards. There is still a lot of stuff here that is not abundantly clear to me.
And how about you also add, Zev, if you can add about Netanyahu's political future, he has to look at his position right now. What works best for any possible re-election, and not entering Israel is not going to help him in that at all. So there's that point to also add.
Yeah, I agree with you, right? I mean, so in terms of political ramifications of what is an intelligence failure, that's not going to be that's not for now, right? That will be when everything is said and done. Then they can do some soul searching and stuff. But no, you are absolutely correct. Netanyahu's political future and his reputation, his legacy as a leader will be largely, I believe, determined and comprised of what he does next. And again, I think personally, the only way that a full-scale invasion of Gaza could be put off, you would still see a small scale, maybe in the north. You have to remember, even if you go just simply into the north, as far as maybe Gaza City or the Gaza River, you still have rockets being fired from the south. So if there was some large deal that came out tomorrow, Saudi Arabia says, we recognize Israel, we will ensure the stability of Gaza with an Arab coalition, then maybe a large scale could be avoided. I don't see that happening, and Netanyahu will go in. Of course. I mean, his statements, his rhetoric, and also this, just very briefly, you have all the defense establishment saying we will soon see the Gaza from the inside. They can't walk that back. They absolutely can't walk that back. So they're going to go in.
I do want to go to Golan on this point. Golan, I asked George earlier about a red line that Iran has and I've asked a lot of panelists this question because this dictates a lot of what's going to happen next. It looks like that red line is pretty strict considering what the US is doing. You could disagree, but all the forces that are moving within the region, the clashes we're seeing on the Lebanese border, the attacks on US bases, and Israel hasn't even entered Gaza yet, and all the missile defense system that the US is moving to the region. In your mind, what is that red line that Iran has, and what could we see next?
Well, I'm not too sure if this so-called red line for Iran has not already passed, and we are actually in the middle of their Iranian executing their predefined strategy, and by this red line, I mean the IMEC memorandum of understanding that was signed in the G20. If you remember, and this is the context that I take all the events that we see today, which I think the conflict in the Gaza Strip is just a small part of that. And that also gives sense to the coalition that we see, which is built between the US, many European countries, and Israel and beyond. And I think that for the better part of the last 20 years, Iran built or tried to erect an economical corridor that will take the riches of its natural resources, especially in the energy, gas and oil, and will direct them towards Europe, going through Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, Middle East, Mediterranean.
But for that to be the case, Iran, like, it's in its best interest for this not to escalate. No.
On the contrary, if there is an alternative to the so-called Iranian economic corridor, or let's call it the Shia economic corridor, if there is a valid and viable and a potential competition, another corridor that you can build, and this is the IMEC, then Iran can lose everything.
This is the what? Sorry, this is the what? The IMEC? What's that?
IMEC. Yeah, you know the IMEC, the India Mediterranean.
Oh, okay, the one that of course, the one that we're talking about earlier. Yeah.
So I think now there is an alternative for Europe, a viable alternative for Europe, and the so-called possible normalization between the Saudis and the Israelis is the cornerstone of this possibility, because it gives them a route with an exit to the Mediterranean, i.e. Israeli shores. So I think Iran is already playing its strategic game. I think Iran is prepared for that for many, many years. I think the alliance between Iran and Russia will have its military manifestation on Syrian ground. As you know, Russian has a great presence there. And also, I think also we need to take into the equation Turkey, because Turkey also got a lot to lose. And with the rhetoric of Erdogan today, obviously, he decided which side he's going to be. But I remind the listeners in this space that today there are Russian, Turkish, and Iranian proxy or non-proxy forces operating in Syria. So Syria is like
we
carved to a degree. Maybe it will get carved even further. But the unfolding of the strategy of Iran, I think, is what's going on. And last thing I would add, and I'll finish with that. If I was carrying out a military strategy, I would not operate my Hezbollah proxy before the Israelis going into Gaza, because then I can divide the power that they can inflict in
split
one
them.
Zev,
can you just want to go to Zev before going to the rest of the panel? Zev, can you just explain again the two pipelines that are competing? The one that is there's the Iranian one. There's the one that goes through the Saudi one that goes from India all the way to Europe, and then we've got the one that Turkey has an incentive in. Did you get all three of them?
So that is not exactly the strongest point of my expertise. I would defer to
George,
maybe Alex or Michael.
George. I think George is the first one to speak to them. George, can you tell us again very briefly, because I know you've gone through it in detail. Alex touched on it as well, and now we have the gentleman that also spoke about it. We had Golan speak about it as well. So what are the three? I'm trying to understand them so I can add them to the equation of what could happen next, and each country's incentive. Where does it lie? What's in their best interest? Because most people look at things superficially, but they don't know what's happening. The discussions that are happening behind the scenes and the incentives that each party has behind the scenes. So we have the pipeline that goes through Saudi all the way to Europe from India. That's number one. And that one, how does Israel come into this? Does it go through Israel as well?
Yes,
George?
it does. Well,
I was going to George on that question. Sorry, Golan.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. George, you there? You got to unmute, bottom left corner.
Oh yeah, I'm here. Sorry. No, that's exactly what I was discussing at the beginning. So this is a proposed trade corridor. It's basically the 21st century spice road, right, which links India all the way into Europe, and it's in competition with the One Belt, One Road. Chinese-led.
Okay. So for that one, Hamas engaging with Israel delays that plan, in your opinion. And that's in Turkey's interest, and that's in Iran's interest, because currently Iran is so I understand how it's in Turkey's interest. Turkey's acting as a corridor from the Middle East to Europe, correct?
That is exactly what Turkey's stated goal is. It's to be the hub linking the East and the West.
Okay.
It's attempted to do that throughout its civilization and in modern Turkey.
Understood.
Yes.
And then you've got the third one that you mentioned, which is the Iranian one, not the Iranian incentive. Can you and that Golan touched on? Can you elaborate on the Iranian incentive, on why that pipeline? Obviously, it doesn't benefit them in any way, but what is their disadvantage in that pipeline going through?
I think what the speaker was discussing is the so-called Shiite crescent that the Iranians would like to develop, which would allow them to reach the Mediterranean Sea to export not only oil and gas, but of course various goods into the international market, and to basically ossify these countries within the grasp of the Iranian state as a patron state. So that's what the Iranians are competing with the Turks, with the Israelis now, and the Indians. So this is where all the competing interests are lying in. As I mentioned at the beginning of this space, the emotions are one thing, but when you look at the geopolitical and geoeconomic realities that these major powers are now vested in, that go through the Mediterranean and through Israel in particular, you understand why this conflict has reared its ugly head once again at this moment in history.
All right, so I know Michael and John Spencer. Yeah, I'll go to you, Faraz and Noga and Hoshiyar in a bit.
Got a question?
Yeah, sure. I'll let you ask your question. Do you just want to touch on this a bit further? And then if John, I'm not sure if John requested, but Michael's here. Michael, can you just quickly comment on the military equipment that the U.S. is moving to the area? Obviously, you can comment on other points, but so the Biden administration is rapidly redeploying approximately a dozen air defense systems in the Middle East after previously withdrawing them. And this is one of the reasons we talked about earlier. It's one of the reasons that they're delaying the U.S. ground operation. We also have Australia deployed more military assets to the Middle East as well. They said it's a significant number of defense personnel, 2 additional military aircrafts as well. And the aim is to apparently assist U.S. citizens in case of an escalation to in the Israel-Gaza war. So you've got all these equipment moving to the region. Does that, in your opinion, Michael, reflect deterrence again, or reflects preparation for a potential or imminent escalation of the war? And I want to add to the discussion that, again, remind everyone, Saudi evacuated diplomats from Lebanon. US told citizens to leave Lebanon before commercial flights are no longer available, offering loans as well. We've had similar warnings in other countries, but most of it was in Lebanon. Michael, I want to get your analysis on what was discussed and the movement of military equipment to the region.
Sure, thanks, Mario, and Ben and Hadi as well for having me back. It's good to be back on with you guys here. Yeah, so right, we've talked a lot about the deterrence value of things like a carrier strike group and a Marine Expeditionary Unit and stuff like that to possibly enable emergency evacuations for U.S. embassies and things like that. Again, in a contingency, in a worst case where that is necessary. I do think more of what you're seeing with these specialized capabilities, though, things like Patriot batteries, which are medium range missile defense systems, right? That are a bit more robust than something like Iron Dome, which is really designed as what we call a point defense or SHORAD system, short range air defense, right? And THAAD, right, which is arguably the U.S.'s largest missile defense system that it can bring to bear, at least surface based, right? And that one is designed to shoot down ballistic missiles, right? So you have to be thinking about why these capabilities are being brought to the region. They're not to counter Hamas, right? They're not to counter, small rockets and things like that. They're designed to counter what I think DoD is planning for, worst case, potential large salvos of missiles, more significant missiles from, Iran, possibly from Hezbollah, that those systems would be needed to defend U.S. troops and stuff like that for. So I think those capabilities, to me, are a little bit more on the contingency and on the planning side than on the straight deterrent side.
But Michael, but if it is contingency, then why would they? I understand it is contingency, not deterrence. But if you add to it what we found out today from the Wall Street Journal, is that they delayed the ground operation for these equipment to arrive to the region. They delayed the ground operation. Yeah. This is a pretty big step to tell Israel to delay, to let our missile defense system come in.
Well, no, I agree. I agree with you on that, Mario. And I think we're just talking past each other a bit, because I agree with you. I think the idea is, look, the U.S. is trying to get the Israelis to slow down so that if these possible scenarios we've been discussing, right, that Hezbollah or other actors get more involved after any kind of ground incursion begins in Gaza, again, even if it's a limited one, that could be enough to cause that response, right, from Hezbollah or from Iran or from whoever. Then the U.S. is saying, we got to have these systems in place first. And so that's not really deterrence, because, right, you're basically conceding, like, we think that an attack may happen. So I'm agreeing with you that it's more designed about trying to get those systems in place before any of that stuff can happen. And the other thing I'd note, without getting too far down the rabbit hole here on the military analysis, is deterrent capabilities have to be right. Generally speaking, they have to be credible as offensive capabilities, right? Like, you don't bring to bear a lot of defensive capabilities with the idea that that's necessarily going to deter your adversary, right? So that's why things like the carriers that can launch Tomahawks and conduct naval strikes with F-18s and things like that, that's why those are a little bit more, designed as a strategic deterrent, whereas things like Patriot are more designed for, like, oh shit, like, we think there's going to be, potential missile salvos we got to plan for. So I'm agreeing with you. I think that is a bad indicator, but I do think we had a good discussion yesterday about reasons to be hopeful for de-escalation. And I think that the longer it takes for this ground incursion to begin, again, like Alex and George and other people have said, regardless of what it ends up looking like, whether it's a smaller thing that is contained mostly to northern Gaza, or whether it's a bigger thing, either way, the longer it takes for that to start, I think does continue, in my opinion, in my analysis at least, to give me hope for de-escalation here and cooler heads to prevail.
So I'll give you some news to kind of dismiss that optimism that me and you might have. Justin, so I think it was Netanyahu that said, he said, we are preparing to enter Gaza by land. I will not talk about the time frame to protect the lives of the soldiers. At this stage, it is necessary to continue to crush Gaza from the air. We are waiting for the appropriate conditions to begin the ground operation in Gaza, and we'll make Hamas pay the price for its actions. Civilians in Gaza must move to the south of the strip. So he's again repeating the same thing. We were talking earlier how that hasn't been said for a while, and we thought that was like a good sign, but there it is. And Netanyahu himself just said it today. On the flip side, there's also Biden. We touched on it earlier, and this is more of a military point, so maybe Alex and Michael could quickly comment on it before I go to Faraz, because I know he's been waiting to speak. Biden desires, so that comes from Axios. They're doing a great job getting us information. Biden desires a military action similar to the 2016 operation in Mosul in Iraq, rather than the more intense campaign like the one in Fallujah in 2004. The 2016 operation, the one in Mosul, against ISIS was mainly an international coalition support focused on an air campaign, as far as I remember. And then the 2004 one is a heavy fighting, substantial destructive, heavy fighting, urban combat. Is that right, guys? Alex or Michael? You might know this well.
Yeah. As far as the breakdown,
God, Michael.
I'll just throw in 2 cents, then Alex will jump on. Yeah, as far as your breakdown on the characterization of those two campaigns. That's accurate. And I think that makes sense because the U.S. has recent experience with participating in the global coalition to defeat ISIS and in what that fight looked like. But I think, again, if we're all assuming that what the Israeli goal is what they say it is, which is the eradication of Hamas, like Alex and others have pointed out, it's very, very hard to do that from the air. And the U.S. benefited from all sorts of groups on the ground that were able to develop target decks, that were able to help with the actual fighting, whether they were Shia militia groups, whether they were Kurds, whether they were other local partners and forces like that, right? Like the U.S. didn't have to do a lot of the dirty work on the ISIS campaign. And so my concern would be, is the IDF really prepared to put up all of that manpower that would be required to do that and to take on the kind of casualties that are just inevitable with any kind of urban warfare? But I'll let Alex kind of follow up on that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, so there's a couple things. This is exactly what I was talking about before when I walked through the differences between, hey, let's just use soft raids and air support to try to knock out Hamas. Like, it's illogical. It doesn't make sense. But I want to give some historical context to what I'm saying here. If we go back to the strategic review that President Obama did when he first took over from President Bush, and when it came to Afghanistan, right, they dragged in General Petraeus. Everybody locked themselves in the Situation Room for forever. And what they came down to was a couple of options. Then Vice President Biden was the one who was advocating for a special operations forces only approach on the ground, backed by airstrikes, similar to what took place right after 9/11 when when Afghanistan was toppled. That's what's in the back of his mind. There's no commitment to a large scale number of troops on the ground. But the problem is it doesn't work in this scenario, right? Like, you can't do what they're trying to do, which is demilitarize Hamas, if you're going to sit there and try to do it from the air alone. And that's from a practical standpoint, militarily, speaking, with trying to demilitarize Hamas. Never mind the international political condemnation and outrage if there's going to be a continued humanitarian situation on the ground and, continuing to drop massive ordnance from the air. There's only so many targets you can hit, right? It doesn't make sense from a whole host of reasons. And like Netanyahu just said, they're preparing to go in. I don't see a scenario in which they do not go in on the ground unless they back off the goal that they have stated, which is the demilitarization of Hamas. It's simply not achievable from an air-only strategy with limited special operations raids.
Can I say something on that, Mario?
Yeah, I'll go, Hoshi, if you don't mind. I want to go to Faraz, but one last quick thing for Alex. Yeah. It is. I'll go to you, Hoshiyar. One last thing, Alex, before I go to Faraz. The U.S. Embassy in Kuwait, I'll read their message. The embassy is aware of threats made on social media by Al-Wiyat Al-Wad Al-Haq, a militia group in Iraq, against U.S. military bases in Kuwait. And therefore, they've put out an alert for U.S. citizens. They've asked them to remain alert. I'm guessing this is pretty common, but I want to get a quick clarity on it, Alex. Putting out a warning based on social media threats being made.
It's not as common in Kuwait. We have seen in the past there's been a small scale, a grenade or a small package found here or there over the years.
Actually, hold on. It's
not really been a hotbed of terrorism.
It just clicked in my mind. It's in Kuwait. Kuwait didn't click in my mind, so that makes it pretty
Wait, Kuwait?
Yeah.
Hold on.
In Kuwait. And we've
Kuwait. Sorry, is that wrong?
Yeah, that's
I've got
right.
the link for it. Yeah, I've got the link for it, Oji.
Well, if it is Kuwait, this is a very close U.S. ally. They literally have a street named after George Bush there. And they have been seeing an Islamic radicalization in the past few years. So it can make sense that something like this would happen, especially with an increased number of people on the streets protesting for Palestine.
But you're saying these alerts are rare in Kuwait, or you're not sure? I know, Alex, I interrupted you.
Very rare. Because the Kuwaiti government is a sovereign country that can control its people very well. They have a very good intelligence program that they keep an eye on their civilians and to make sure that there is no terrorist attacks of this kind that would happen. So yeah, this is not as usual. We could expect something like this to happen back in the day in Saudi Arabia, but not in Kuwait.
Alex, you'd agree, and then I'll go to
in Kuwait, Mario. Just for context, everybody that's on,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think Yeah, so first of all, Kuwait's it's a fairly wealthy country. They've got great oil resources. The majority of the population lives in Kuwait City on the water. It's very modernized. There's not a significant impoverished situation or lack of education in many cases that you see in other countries where you see a lot of radicalization. So this is a very rare thing that we're seeing here. I mean, again, there have been very small incidents. I remember, most of us will laugh when we travel through Kuwait headed to Iraq. You get some very high-strung, soldiers who were stationed there. That was their war zone tour, and they would start with, this is Kuwait, and we would all kind of chuckle because nothing really happens there. It is very, very rare in that sense. So I'll put that aside, and then find the last question you asked that I didn't get to because there was some good discussion in between. The U.S. and other countries moving significant, missile defense systems in the area is for two reasons, as I can see it. First of all, we've seen now, as of today, 30 U.S. troops have been injured over the last week in attacks in Iraq and Syria, right? Now, in many cases, these were traumatic brain injuries or minor injuries where they were returned to work. But that's not to say that the next attack or something else doesn't result in U.S. deaths. And if that happens, I guarantee you there is going to be an overwhelming response. The one thing the U.S. does and does well is it'll overreact, right? So you can sit there and take some punches in the chin, but at some point, when somebody makes a decision to strike back, that big arm is going to swing and it's going to hit. So when that happens, there is a risk at that point from missile strikes coming from a couple of different directions against U.S. troops. We've already seen that Iran has no problem launching ballistic missiles against the U.S. if they feel that their interests are at risk. And again, there was a delay, so the missiles were known that they were coming, and there was time to get in the bomb shelters. But still, that was after the Qasem Soleimani assassination inside of Iraq. They still consciously launched ballistic missiles at U.S. troops stationed inside of Iraq, knowing that there could have been a significant military response in response to what it was they had done. So Iran's already demonstrated that they're willing to hit back if they're struck in that area, right? So if the U.S. is going to be heavy-handed in the response, who knows what the response is there? And there's still 120 to 150,000 missiles and rockets that Hezbollah has in southern Lebanon. If they turn that on and Israel starts to get overwhelmed and the U.S. then starts to strike targets to try to alleviate the pressure on the Israelis, who knows what happens afterwards? And again, not saying that any one of those particular scenarios is more likely than the others to happen. If you are the U.S. and you're unsure of which way this is going to go because it's so fluid on the ground and it's still a powder keg, and one wrong move by one of these actors or one of these attacks results in significant casualties, it could set the powder keg off. And if you don't have the resources in the region to protect your own troops, let alone strike back, you're a sitting duck. And that's not something that's going to be tolerated. So that's what I believe the reasoning is. And I know John Spencer's on here. He may have a different opinion.
Yeah, John, I've got actually something. I've dug into this Kuwait Alert, everyone. And I want to go through a few points. I was just reading about it as you were speaking, Alex. And the group is actually interesting. They've been behind some attacks, not only in Saudi, but also in Saudi and in the UAE. So I'm going to post something now. Let me just post it right now. And I've just kind of summarized the alert, and I'm going to read it out as well for the audience and for the panel. And then, John, I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Faraz, I know you've been waiting, so I will go to you once we're done with this Kuwait Alert. And Faraz, if you have more insight into this group, it would be great. So the group is called Al-Jiwa Wad al-Hayk, Iranian-backed Iraqi militia. So it means the Righteous Promise Brigades threatened to attack U.S. forces in Kuwait and the UAE on October 24th. So they've actually threatened to attack U.S. forces in the UAE as well. So the group claimed drone attacks in Saudi in 2021 and vital facilities in Abu Dhabi in 2022. These are, again, for anyone in the audience that's not too familiar with the Middle East, you don't get attacks in those regions. This is very, very rare, especially when you move. Saudi's rare, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, extremely rare. CTP, so critical threats. Previously, it says that this group was likely a front for Kataib Hezbollah. Is Kataib Hezbollah a different group? I think it's a different group to Hezbollah. Can anyone clarify?
Yeah, can I say something on that since I'm in Iraq, Mario?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, who said I'm in Iraq? Oh, Hoshiyar, is that? Yeah, let me read out the points and I'll go to you, Hoshiyar, because that will be obviously an area you understand, you and Hadi. Pro-Iran Telegram channels affiliated with Iraqi proxy groups echoed the group's threat to attack U.S. forces in Kuwait and the UAE. This threat and its amplification in pro-Iran channels suggests the Iranian-backed group is willing to escalate. So this is another Iranian proxy making threats. So Iran seems to be activating a lot of proxies. This is one in UAE and in Kuwait. This is very unusual, unless that proxy is acting alone, which I highly doubt. Hashar, what are your thoughts on this Kuwait warning?
We've seen this.
Mario, we've actually seen this.
Mario,
No, go ahead. No, quick comment. Just quickly, please. I'll go to Hoshia. What's seen this one?
It is quick. We've seen this for the past 10 days. It looks like, and we've discussed it before. It does look like Iran is desperately trying to hold on to the assets that it's going to lose by engaging the entire region, trying to stop the war from culminating.
Hoshiyar?
Mario, this is extremely important. When ISIS took over 1/3 of Iraq, Baghdad was threatened. So the Marja of the Shias, Sayyid Ayat al-Sistani, who is in Najaf, issued a fatwa for jihad against ISIS. So PMF was forced, which is basically Popular Mobilization Forces, and a law in Parliament was adopted. So they are funded. The budget for this year is like $5 billion just for these, forces. This were led by people that were very close to Iran. Qasem Soleimani actually put it together. And Abu Muhdi Muhandis, who was with Soleimani when they were killed in Baghdad. So what you see happening now, the President Biden, Secretary Blinken, Austin called the Iraqi Prime Minister, Mohammed Shia Soudani. They told him, you have to control these groups, okay? So PMF cannot go and attack. They create these names for, every time, every
PMF is
popular mobilization units.
Popular
This is
Mobilization
Iranian
Force.
proxies in Iraq, and they are in parliament as well, by the way, like Hezbollah. But if there is evidence they are involved, so this is Iran looking for plausible deniability. They tell someone to do something under a different name. Nobody knows, who they are. After an event, in every conflict, they simply disappear. So it's the same
But why?
people.
But how she?
Yes.
I understand that. If it's in Iraq and Syria, I understand. But for them to start making those threats in the UAE and Kuwait,
They did it before,
that seems.
Mario.
When? Back when the Iranian general died, or
No,
after
the
that?
ones you mentioned in UAE, the relation
Yeah,
basically,
22. Of course.
the
Yeah. Why
relationship
did they?
between, sorry, the
Yeah.
relationship between
Yeah. Go ahead.
Iran and UAE broke down, okay? So Iran carried out, all these groups carried out a number of attacks. What happened after that? The UAE National Security Advisor went to Tehran, they reestablished diplomatic relations, and the attack stopped. So what more evidence do you want?
Hold on.
Yeah,
Are you
but
being?
can I add something about Alwiyat
Yeah. Go
Wa'ad
ahead.
al-Haq? I don't know where is the source for that, but I was checking and there's no official channel about them. But I know them basically. I remember them from 2022, which was last year. They had the same exact threats that they're gonna target the UAE and whatever. And I don't think they're basically being, I don't know, ordered by Iran to release those threats. I think they're just groups of amateurs in Iraq releasing every time a statement, the same exact thing every year. So I wouldn't take it seriously.
I'm contacting a former candidate for the in Kuwait and a journalist to come to the space and comment on this,
Oh, that would be
Mario. I'll
great.
get back to you on
Thank you,
this.
Rajiv. That would be great.
Hey,
Go ahead,
Mario.
Alex, and for us right after.
Yeah, sorry. So just to give some context and a little bit of history there for folks, right? So the PMF, the Popular Mobilization Front, it's kind of like an umbrella for a bunch of different Shia militia organizations that were there. They came together, as was just mentioned eloquently by one of those speakers, and funded to fight ISIS. But for many years before that, these were groups that were formed, in response to the internal civil war that almost launched, launched in the midst of the war in Iraq when U.S. forces were there, when the bombing of the Golden Mosque, etc. And so Iran had brought in Ali Musa Dakduk, who was a founding member of Hezbollah from Lebanon, into Iraq to help form some of these groups originally. So you had a couple of players that are still involved in Iraqi politics who were in and out of favor at one point with Iran. So Muqtada al-Sadr, whose family has got one of the cleanest lineages traced back to the Prophet. And then you had Laith and Qais Ghazili, two brothers who helped to form, Asab al-Haq and a few other groups that were there. So between Khatib Hezbollah, Asab al-Haq, and the Sadrist groups that were there, you had a number of Shia militias that were kind of subordinate to Iran. And you had, Qasem Soleimani, who was helping to provide material support to include, the explosively formed penetrators, which are roadside bombs made from, copper on the outside that turned molten and were piercing armored vehicles that resulted in a lot of deaths of U.S. troops. So these are organizations that have been around and have been evolving for the last 15 years or so that have now kind of under one big umbrella. And as was mentioned earlier, they help to serve as a lot of the ground force to counter ISIS. So they are very close to Iran, and again, as I was mentioning, they're being turned on all over the region, and it still seems to be threats. They're not threats, like deterrence messages. Hey, again, we can reach out and touch you, and whether that's as simple as Iran saying, "Hey, all right, guys, do whatever you want at this point, or direct orders. There's still some sort of tacit approval from Iran for what's going on, because
Yeah,
especially with the ballistic missiles in Yemen.
yeah, I'd be too surprised for Iran to let its proxies act alone in such a sensitive time. I want to go to Faraz. I appreciate you for waiting, Faraz. We've gone through a lot of points, and one thing that I want to dig into again, as Wajir tries to get us someone to comment on the Kuwait situation, is the ground operation. We saw the escalation in the West Bank that are ongoing. I think we saw a strike in the West Bank as well yesterday, which is not keeping up anymore. A lot of arrests made. Maybe you can give us an update on the ground for us, and then your thoughts on the ground operation. And also maybe you can touch on Hamas seems to be, trying to convince Israel, or try to, tease Israel about entering Gaza. So do you think Hamas is well equipped to be able to deal with a ground operation from Israel? Faraz, you got to unmute, man. Faraz? Man,
Mario, can I have a second until he comes back?
No, I'll use that opportunity. Hey, Faraz. Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I just had a question for.
Did you hear the question I asked you, man, or you missed it?
Mr. George, regarding
Faraz, can you hear me?
Basically, it's a twofold question regarding.
Firas, can you hear Mario?
Yeah, all good.
President Trump's relationship with Arab leaders and the Israeli Prime Minister in the region, how that developed over his time in office, and what you would expect if we saw President Trump in 2024, how that would play out, specifically with the relationship between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas.
Yeah, actually, it's a good question, and George, you can kind of link it. I brought you down for us just because you had issues, you couldn't hear any of us. But George, you can kind of link it to what impact the elections would have on all this, because that's something we haven't discussed. And then I'll go to Ziad to answer the question I asked Faraz. Go ahead, George.
Sure. Well, domestically, 75%, at least 75% of Israelis that have been polled have put the blame squarely on Netanyahu for the security lapse that resulted in over 1,400 Israeli civilians and soldiers being killed on October 7th and October 8th. So Netanyahu is fighting for his political survival at the moment, and I think that is really what's going to galvanize him to actually, enter into Gaza. It's primarily a domestic situation for the domestic audience, and obviously, as I mentioned before, to rescue the hostages and to decimate Hamas's political and military leadership. Regarding Trump, in my opinion, and I don't represent him obviously right now, but my opinion of how he would operate should he get reelected, and of course he's the GOP presumptive nominee. He's leading in the polls, and he's neck and neck with Biden. If you look at all the reputable polling out today and over the past month or so, when I helped broker the meeting that he had as a candidate with General El-Sisi, and he met El-Sisi at the UN General Assembly in 2016, and then Netanyahu, it basically did portend what type of foreign policy he would seek out during his first term and potentially his second, and that is to look out after U.S. vital interests, both domestically and abroad. And interests in the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean are about preventing wars or conflagration, the way that we are exactly witnessing today. That's exactly why he focused so earnestly on the United States becoming a net energy exporter, so that our allies in Europe would have to wean off of Russian energy and not overtly depending on the Middle East for oil. So I think Netanyahu likely will not survive this politically once the dust settles. So I don't even think we will have Netanyahu in power should President Trump get reelected. So what I do see happening, though, is based on the previous confidence-building measures and the relationships that were built during the first administration, and of course the Abraham Accords, that likely will be built upon, and you will see other countries try to get part of the Abraham Accords 2.0. And I think the reason that is so important is based on what I've been discussing during this space. Its focus on economics, focus on trade, and forget the religious dimensions as much as possible. And that's why those normalization or peace agreements were able to occur. And once you abandon that, the economics, and you focus on the religious aspects the way we are now, war ensues. So I think we have to go back to that. And I think you'll likely see the Trump 2.0 focus on Abraham Accords 2.0 once the dust settles.
I have a quick question for you. Then I'd like to go to John to talk about ground operations. But Mr. Papadopoulos, can you explain then why? I'm just curious why during some recent Trump rallies, Trump has basically called Hezbollah smart and said, "Well, Netanyahu let us down." I've actually just been curious as to why he's been saying that.
This is strictly my opinion, but when the candidate, of course, says that these are smart, he's not, of course, advocating for their tactics or supporting what their raison d'être is. Of course, he's basically saying that they are cynical and they are able to manipulate the political situation on the ground in the Middle East, and that is to suck in the Muslim world writ large, the Arab world, into a jihad, if you will, or a religious conflict with underlying political, security, and economic issues against Israel, and to basically once again decouple Israel from the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean, which the Trump administration worked extremely hard to connect Israel to the greater Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean. So I think that is what Donald Trump is discussing when he says that they are smart, because that's exactly what is unfortunately occurring with Israel today in the Middle East. They are once again in the crosshairs of the Muslim world as a whole. You likely are seeing these peace agreements with Saudi Arabia scuttled and potentially permanently scuttled based on this war, and that does not fit into the interests of the United States. It's not in the interests of America, and certainly it only feeds the interests of destabilizing regimes like Iran.
And as to Netanyahu letting us down?
In terms
That
of
piece
what?
I can answer, George, if you want.
Sure, step in, please.
Yeah, so there was comments made the other day where basically President Trump had asserted that the Israelis declined to participate in the operation to assassinate Qasem Soleimani at the last minute, and that the U.S. went and did it alone, and that was the context in which he said, they let us down. So whether that's true or not is a different
But
story.
Mike, on the same token, Mike Pence immediately rebutted that the next day during an interview with Caitlin
Mario,
Collins.
sorry to cut you guys off. Jassim Al-Jrayed, former Kuwaiti who ran for office and a member of the press, is officially in the space. He could comment on the situation in Kuwait.
No, I appreciate it. Send me through his handle, and I'll bring him up, and we could get us.
I did. I sent you the handle.
Perfect. I'll work on that now. Zev, I just wanted to. I had a question for John. Perfect. Because I'll ask my question first, if you don't mind, Zev. Something I've been wanting to ask for a while, and then I'll bring up the Kuwaiti official to have a discussion on the alert there. But John, the question that I have is about the U.S. influence over Israeli military decisions. So we have, I think it comes from the Wall Street Journal, from memory, the CIA's head maintains regular contact with the Mossad's leader, Mr. Barnea. American military advisors advise Israel against a ground entry into Gaza. That's American military advisors. It's not political. They suggest combining airstrikes with targeted raids within Gaza for a more effective strategy. We talked about earlier, Mosul versus whatever it was. Collaborative efforts also involve discussions with security officials in the Arab world, and then the primary goal is to prevent further escalations. But what are your thoughts on that particular point? The military advisors, the U.S. military advisors, advising against a ground entry into Gaza. John, is your mic on?
I mean, I think that, he got me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's all fine and good to do if you're best military advice based on lack of knowledge of the situation. I don't agree with it. I could see how that would be a consideration rather than laying. I mean, I think that's an unfortunate statement. Rather than saying, "Hey, look, there are heavy costs for continuing a ground invasion." I agree with Benjamin that there's no way to achieve the required goal through that course of action. As Alex was saying, the Axios approach is way off, though, on the differences between the approach of the 2004 Battle of Fallujah versus the U.S. support to include 2 regular active duty divisions assigned at first to just advise, and then Obama changed it to advise, assist, and follow. There's 2 3-star generals, which is kind of curious about, assigning a 3-star general to Israel, where in the 2016-17 battle or against ISIS, a 3-star general, first General Miller and General Townsend, assigned to coordinate all the, not just air support or special forces raids, direct fire support, artillery, mortars, Apache helicopters, a full gamut of air power to support ISF forces to destroy ISIS in a very similar mission set that is required in order to achieve the mission with Hamas. So I just don't think that's good, best military advice from U.S. military senior forces who haven't been in an urban battle in a long time.
Yeah, and I also think that, I mean, these are just leaks to the press about suggestions and so forth. John, Colonel Spencer, I'd like to ask you something. Do you see a similar groundwork being laid between the U.S. and so forth and Israel as to what you just referenced, as to what may be upcoming?
Yeah, 100%. But even so, again, it's hard to find a good comparison where there are elements of preparation, professional military, right? So, you used 100,000 security forces, which is actually, we were just talking about the Shia militias that were used, and the government used them in the battles against ISIS. So even in the Battle of Mosul, they were just assigned, security and the isolation of the city and things like that. And it's a very complex situation. In this case, absolutely, I see all those steps: the air campaign, the marshaling of forces and the amount of force needed and positioning them, the rehearsals they're doing for what is, I still believe, is inevitable. And actually, Mario, I think some of the movement of U.S. capabilities from 2 more air defense systems, Iron Dome systems that Israel had sold to the U.S., arriving, studying all the conditions. To me, all this movement is a sign that the ground invasion will be going because of these systems getting in place, getting ahead of anticipated responses in small scale, as in the mobilizing of the Shia militias. But Benjamin, absolutely everything I'm seeing, there's nothing I'm seeing in the preparations and everything that doesn't show this will be a similar deliberate attack of the dense urban area where you have to go into it. I agree with Alex. You can't bomb your way. You can't special force operation, which isn't what happened in Mosul. You can't special forces operation raid your way to achieve the goal.
I agree.
I wanted to go to Yassim. Yassim, how are you? Yassim, you got to unmute bottom left corner. Pleasure to have you.
Jassim.
Yes, hi guys. I'm so sorry.
That's right.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So I'm going to read out a comment here from the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait. The embassy is aware of threats made on social media by Alwiyat Al-Wad al-Haq, a militia group in Iraq, against U.S. military bases in Kuwait. Would love to get your thoughts on this, how significant it is, because it is pretty uncommon, and how much influence does Iran have over those groups?
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you so much first to invite me to answer this question, and I'm glad to be amongst those bright-minded people. Well, first of all, let me offer an overview of what happened in Kuwait's free-speaking space in front of the parliament building. It's called Sahat al-Irada, the space of the courage and the decision making. So those people, which so-called the Brotherhood and the Salafiyya Sururiya, the Salafis militia and the radical Islamists in the political spectrum of Kuwait, now they've started to threat the American embassy a few days ago. And they've started to say that the Canadian ambassador should leave the country right now, and we are going by walking to the embassy to burn it down, and that has been raised on the radar of the government, and the government did not do anything to those people who made these announcements. Now, the Iraqis, they found a very ready grounds to get a help from those silent militia in Kuwait, which was one of them has been condemned and put in jail, and they've found the mercy from the leader of Kuwait, and now they're ready for any movement. So they found a common grounds that they want to threat the United States in a way. They think that the United States.
Who found common ground exactly? The group and who else?
The Iraqis.
The
yeah, they call
PMF?
them Abd al-Haq.
Abd al-Haq. But these
yes,
are
yes, the PMF.
okay. So this group, the Abd al-Haq, is an Iraqi group that also has presence in Kuwait?
Yes,
okay.
They don't have presence. They have footprints and common grounds with another group, which is related to Hezbollah in Kuwait.
Oh, okay. Related to the Hezbollah in Lebanon, like directly related?
Exactly. Related to Lebanon, and they have ties with the Irani regime. So in Kuwait now, I just want to conclude with the following. In Kuwait right now, Kuwait had become now as a jungle where everybody wants to reflect a rage to the United States in relation to Gaza attack. I don't understand exactly why United States at this point of time. Iraqi and Iran now, they're trying to, raise the tension in Kuwait, and Kuwait is not at its best government controls at the moment. That's
so
about
you think Iran has a strong influence in those things happening? And the next question I have is, how uncommon or common is this?
Well, Iran has always had influence on even Kuwait's parliament building, even in the politics, even in the bills that they're trying to pass to the final stages in our system.
They also threatened the UAE, and that only happened once when Iran and the UAE, I think one of our panelists mentioned, when the UAE and Iran had some sort of negotiations failed, and then Iran worked with the same group, I'm assuming, the same proxy to attack, to use a drone to attack a certain target in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi. That drone was shot down. I remember, I think I was in Dubai when that happened. I remember hearing the story. It wasn't too long ago. And
Burj Khalifa, yes.
Oh, it's in Burj Khalifa in Dubai.
I agree. Yeah.
Yes.
In Dubai.
Okay, wow.
Well, what I'm trying to say as well, that the United Arab Emirates, they've always had that tension with Iran about the islands. They have islands that has been already invaded, and the Irani, they have their power on, and the United Arab Emirates, they're trying to have a healthy relationship and ignore this tension. So I'm not surprised actually that Iran started to talk about the United Arab Emirates after exactly Dr. Reem Al-Hashimi, the Emirati minister that is in charge for the foreign relationship. She had a very, very balanced speech in the UN, and it was really outraged and ratioed by Iranis and Iraqis. In Kuwait now, let me go back to Kuwait. In Kuwait is an easy target for all those radical Islamists and extremist radical Islamist political groups. The Hezbollah in Kuwait, they have their grounds, and the Shias are ready to respond and cohere with their source. Iran is feeding the entire nation, the entire region now with that hate message that Haniyeh has passed in his last speech. He said, go to the borders, try to reach to any border ahead of you, and try to create that mess. Now, in Kuwait, we don't have that control.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah. Now, I appreciate the overview. Jassim, Wajih, if you can give Jassim my number, and this way, Jassim, I can message him whenever there's news related to Kuwait. We can have him come on if he has time. I've just got a question on. I've got a question of Hadi. Hadi, I know a lot of the people in the panel have their hand up. Hadi, I've asked you something about Hezbollah. Hezbollah's leader, Nasrallah, he did say, quote, in a handwritten note, honors the fallen fighters in a handwritten note as martyrs on the way to Jerusalem. Does that mean much?
It does, because that's a very, very rare thing for him to do, to say something like that in a handwritten note before even going to do a speech in circumstances like this. So there is a message behind this, and a lot of people are speculating different things, of course, from a lot of sides in Lebanon. But the sides from the supporter base, they're basically claiming that he considers that this is the beginning of a battle for the freedom of Jerusalem, or a battle against Israel that's gonna soon enough happen. Even now or in the future, is gonna be ceasefire. Does not. It's gonna happen. So that's how people are looking at it from his base. Because for him to actually say that in handwritten, it's actually kind of rare. He doesn't usually do that, and when he does that, there's
Hadi,
definitely a message behind it.
I'd like to ask Hadi a quick question. So when he says the battle for Jerusalem, is that literal or figuratively speaking?
So I mean, what he's saying figurative, but what the essence of it is kind of literal, if you say it like that. So that's the goal for him, for them, for like what they're talking about is the goal right now. And the fact that he said that
Okay.
about those who fell on the borders the past 2 weeks, that means that for in his vision and Hezbollah's vision, that this is the beginning of a battle against Israel and the liberation of Jerusalem.
Jesus.
Has Nasrallah made? Yeah, I wasn't aware. Has he made a televised
No, he
address
hasn't.
yet?
That's
No,
the
no,
weird
nothing
thing.
yet.
Hadi's a
Not
bit
even. This
worried.
is the only thing he made. He just this letter, handwritten letter.
Is that the
Talk about
first communication since
yes,
the
But
war
that's the
started?
first. That's
yeah,
the first.
that's really that's so interesting to me because I'm so used to seeing him, give his passionate speeches and so forth. Usually for any
Is
major
it
conflict.
possible something happened to him?
No, that's why we saw
No.
the
No, I
hand
don't.
written letter. It's there. And
No, exactly. That's it. We're not seeing him. We're seeing a handwritten note. This
no,
is
no, no,
something
nothing
different.
happened. We would
You
have.
would think that at this point,
So I think that I don't think
No, no, nothing
we would
happened.
have
We
heard,
would have
right?
known.
I don't
Yeah.
think. Honestly, I
Um,
don't. I'm honestly
No,
asking.
no, nothing happened to
didn't
him.
we see him this
He's
morning in
there,
the meeting with
but
the three
Yeah,
groups?
we did. Yeah.
yeah, but the thing is, when he doesn't talk, that means there's a lot of escalation that he's gonna get. He probably his group will get physically involved. That's why they're calculating. He doesn't talk unless he
Mhm.
has the full plan to tell his supporters. He's not gonna go out and say we don't know what's
Very
gonna happen.
interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling. Yeah, because normally, like I said very quickly, I'm always used to seeing him give his speeches, reading from the paper. In any type of escalation over the years, I found it very
Because
odd that we haven't
it's
seen him
usually
do the same thing.
escalations where the base already have an opinion on, and they know they're not gonna get involved, or they're gonna get involved. For example, like the war in Syria, he was silent for a while until he went up and he said, "This is happening. This is happening. This is our position when it comes to Syria." And then when they got involved in Syria, that's when he went out. Actually, went out and he announced the intervention of Hezbollah in Syria. So it's kind of similar. I think he's just calculating on what's going to happen next, and then he's going to come out.
Okay, so hold on before we move on. That's actually really so Hadi. So just to, if you want to summarize in one sentence what he means by this, please tell me if I get it right. He could mean, it's one way of looking at it. This is the beginning of the inevitable battle for Jerusalem.
Yes, exactly. It could be now. It could be in long term. There could be a ceasefire now. But what he means is the ones who have fallen now, they are on this path. So this is the best path.
I do have to say there is a good conversation going on in other spaces that this is the ideal time for all the jihadists to attack Israel because so many people are united, because there's so many
Just
fronts, because so that's a
yeah.
conversation that is being taking place.
And plus, Mario, if you think about it, there's something people are not noticing. The ones who Hezbollah are mourning right now, the soldiers who have fell, they're the first soldiers who actually fell in confrontation with Israel when it comes to defending Gaza. And the other ones were either direct war with Israel when it comes to defending Lebanon, or fighting ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria, or other things being directly hit by Israel, for example. But this is the first time where Hezbollah soldiers are being killed in the battles defending Gaza. So that's why I think he also said that it's very symbolic as well.
I want to, before going to the panel, just for the audience, if you can put us in the comments your thoughts, obviously on anything we've discussed, any question you have for the panel, I do read them, but also your thoughts on this letter. So I'm going to read out the letter. I'm just tweeting out the analysis that Hadi has given. I'm going to tweet out that the letter's been tweeted 11 hours ago, but I'm going to tweet out with some of the notes that we've just heard now. But so Hadi, can you tell me who in Lebanon is analyzing it as such? He's saying his followers are analyzing it as such?
So not just his followers, his base as in like journalists, researchers, there's a lot of them on Twitter. They just like kind of analyze their own perspective on it. And people are looking at it in a different way. But I think for most of the people who are supporters of Hezbollah, they won't see it in any other way for him to come out and say that this is what we're calling these.
Thanks, Hadi. You're like the man I always rely on. It's like if Hadi contacts me, means shit is going down, and he didn't contact me for this. It's actually that would have been the highlight of the space for me. That's
because
what it
I
means.
saw them, they sent it on the group, and I was just waiting for some analysis from the. I mean, I had my own opinion as well. This, like what I'm telling you, is also.
What is your opinion? This is what people have analyzed it. What is your personal opinion of this letter?
My personal opinion.
I've just for the audience, if they want to read it, and let me before you tell us your personal opinion, I've pinned it above already, and it says the following. Okay, it's actually in Arabic. Can you read it, Hadi?
Read it.
Is it worth reading?
Or English?
Yeah, like it's the letter that's pinned above. Can you see it?
Yeah. Do you want me to translate it or just read it in Arabic?
No, not in Arabic.
Translate, please.
Yeah, translate. Is it gonna be interesting to translate, or it's pretty like?
I mean, wait. I have someone who tweeted it in English, by the way, so I can just read it over.
Yeah, please. Can you just read it? Read whatever he sent. You could redo it later if you need time to find it, and also if you send it through my way, that'll be good.
I'll let you know when I find it.
Yeah. No, before that, I want to get your thoughts on it, if that's okay. And by the way, just I'll be rotating the panel quickly just to get people that understand.
Okay,
can
so
help
my
us. I want to get a chance. Yeah, go ahead.
On it basically is because Hezbollah is very, very, very specific and precise about everything they do, especially when it comes to their soldiers, where they fight, how they fight, what they call them. So the ones in Syria, they had their name when they were killed. I think Difa al-Muqaddas or something like that. They had this designated the Holy Defense. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was that, but I forgot. To be honest, we were. They had the name of the soldiers who fell there. They had a name for the soldiers who fell in 2006. So for of course, it only makes sense for them to have a name for the soldiers who are falling right now in this battle, the flood of Al-Aqsa. But for him to say ala tariq Quds, like on the path of Jerusalem, that's also even more symbolic, meaning that this is the first time where Hezbollah is actually talking or hinting a full war for the liberation or the beginning of the liberation of Jerusalem. So this is my opinion. But the name is kind of
the same opinion as the others.
Yeah, I mean, we all had it. I mean, also, when we read it, we all had the same thought. But for me, I just make it a little bit more symbolic than actual physical. Physical, my personal opinion, you don't usually talk about personal opinion. My personal opinion, the war is coming now in 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. It's going to come. We cannot avoid it.
And it's not going to be short.
It's not going to be short.
So I thought it was easily avoidable as the world gets more and more intertwined and the incentives get more aligned.
I didn't know you were such
so
a Mario.
Just really quickly. There was Israel Hayom is a free Israeli newspaper. It's the most widely distributed newspaper in Israel. This is fascinating. Israel Hayom claims, so I'll translate it. The army requested an approval to assassinate Hezbollah Hassan Nasrallah, deputy head of the political office Saleh Aruri, and PIJ Ziad Nakhlala. But the PM 8:46 this morning, the report came out, but the prime minister's cabinet refused. And they are pretty credible. Israel Hayom is like CNN. I'd love to go to Alex.
Before that, sorry, before going to Alex and everyone else, just on that, can you send that through to me, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, Mario, I have the statement in English if you want me to read it out.
Yeah, man. Please, no, definitely read it. This is all pretty concerning to me. Like now you're having. So before you read it, Zev, who wanted to assassinate Hezbollah as leader? Hezbollah Nasrallah. Who was it that requested for the assassination?
So it says, it's about the army requested. So it would have been, those in the army who were planning and so forth, but the prime minister's office refused.
Hold on.
I'll send you the
just to be clear,
the link.
The IDF requests to assassinate the leader of Hezbollah.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's what the report
I think there was a similar request as well, like 4 years ago. I read it, I think.
There was, I remember.
Yeah, I think they said it, and also it was refused. But
it was Havertz. Yeah. You're absolutely right. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, they wanted the same thing.
So if there was a similar request a few years ago, can we not make such a big deal out of it? Like, this is not.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen anyway.
Well, obviously it's not going to happen.
When was the last request? Zev?
Like 4 or 5 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago, Hadi is right. But just to what Piotr said, so while it's clearly not going to happen, I don't think you can just sweep it under the rug.
You don't assassinate the leader of a group at such a sensitive time when you're worried about a war with that group, unless you think there's strategic value in that. In other words, there's a likelihood that Hezbollah will join the war. I want to go back to the letter, and then I brought up James as well, and the other lady, I forgot her name, she was to come up. She always helps us analyze Lebanese politics. But before going to James, and we have Muhammad as well, Hadi, can you please read the letter?
Yes.
And
So
if you can
it
also send me
says,
the translated version, that would be great, please.
yeah, sure. After I read this. Okay, so it says, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, to the brothers and Hezbollah media units and institutions. So that's specifying to them. May Allah Almighty protect them, peace be upon you. Okay. In line with the reality of the ongoing battle with the Zionist enemy since October 7, with the Al-Aqsa flood, and in confirmation of the identity of the sacrifices made for the sake of Allah Almighty on our Lebanese borders with occupied Palestine, please adopt the designation of the martyrs who rose since October 7 as martyrs on the road to Al-Quds, Jerusalem, and announce their ascension. Any martyr is called a martyr on the road to Al-Quds in obituary statements, funeral marches, memorial occasions, and whatnot. So he's saying that we need to refer to them as that in every occasion. I ask Allah Almighty to grant all the martyrs, may Allah be pleased with them, acceptance, mercy, and high rank, and their honorable families with patience, seeking reward and dignity in this world and the hereafter. Hassan Nasrallah, Wednesday, October 25th, 2023.
James, what are your thoughts on this letter? And then we'll go to Muhammad.
My thought is when I read it, my first thought was it was big, because it's similar to like your final plan. Like Hadi is saying, it's in cycles. Like his military action, his attacks, all of them had a certain cycle to it, a certain understanding. You understood what was the objective, what was the goal, and this is the first time that he puts the actual goal, because that's the first time he talks to. So his goal is Jerusalem. That's what he's saying, and Hezbollah's position has always been liberating the south, moving down, and keep moving down until we liberate Jerusalem. It's one of their goal. It's one of their objectives. It's the objective of Iran too. They are backing them. So it's as if they entered that last cycle in their objective, and it's a win or lose situation. It's either I go in and I finish what's happening on the south. I finish Israel technically, or the occupation and what's happening down there. That's their point of view. I'm quoting what they're saying, not what they're saying, but the objective. Or I lose, and this is what's scaring me. It's becoming like more and more. Hezbollah, if Hezbollah was going to lose, if Hezbollah was going to lose control, they would never lose control in like a meh fashion and then go out of style. They're going to do something big, and I think we're entering that last cycle. I don't think it's something that's going to happen in a week. I don't think it's something that's going to happen in 2 weeks. I don't know if it's something that's going to happen in 2 weeks. It might take years, like Hadi said, but they entered that last cycle in their existence.
And also,
And
as well, the fact that he said Jerusalem, that means he's enforcing the idea that Hezbollah is also involved in what's happening in Palestine and what happens in Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa.
Yeah, that's true.
So they're enforcing
Well,
that they're not just
there's a majority of people are out there that's literally just supporting Hezbollah and Iran and some of these factions solely on the fact that they want to liberate Palestine from Israel, like that. And so it is necessary for them to cater to that group, because it's a really big part of their base. I think it's important to put it that way for viewers that don't understand the nuances.
I want to
also just want to make this last point and information that the last time Hezbollah, after the war in Syria, named their martyrs was the martyrs of the Second Independence, Shuhada Tahrir Thani. That was when Hezbollah went to some Lebanese areas in the north and was fighting against Al-Qaeda and ISIS and liberated some areas in North Lebanon. And so that was the goal. That's why they called them the martyrs of the Second Liberation, the Second Independence, and that's what happened. So it's also routine to name their martyrs in each battle a different name. And this one's also kind of the same, but it's more symbolic and more like forward.
Muhammad, I want to go to you before.
They also have like nickname Haidara, like the hero, like the lion. they have like nicknames to their warriors
Yeah, that's
that they
like kind
give.
of like normal. They all, not just them. Everyone in Lebanon who has a gun. They have that.
I want to go to Muhammad. Muhammad, do you have a more positive outlook of that comment by Nasrallah? Because if just let me mute you for a sec because you've got a lot of background noise. But if everyone's saying that this means that they're going to be fighting for Israel now or later, but obviously it's going to be now or never kind of thing because Hamas is at war with Israel and Israel wants to wipe out Hamas. Like this seems to be extremely serious, and yet no one's really talking about it, Mohammed, or at least not outside of Lebanon.
Yes, is it better? Yes, is
Yeah,
it
go
better
ahead, man.
right now? You still
No, it's
okay?
worse.
So
No, it's bad. It's. Can you get closer to your mic, or maybe
it's
change the
just I'm
Bluetooth?
driving, probably that's why.
Ah, okay. Give it a
Okay.
try. Let's see how it goes. Give it a try. Go ahead.
All right. Okay, so I think this letter has more than a message on it. First, I agree with what Hadi and some other people mentioned, but the first message is that he made that letter, he handwritten just because he wanna give a gesture for the parents of the fallen soldiers in Lebanon. He wanna make it personal to them because he's pretty known that he gives so much appreciation to the parents of the fallen soldiers as a curiosity from him, you know. And the second message from this letter is, yes, it is the third stage of their war. Now it's all about Jerusalem. From now on, every single soldier gonna fall by the name of Jerusalem. And he's indirectly, officially initiated that he is in the heart of the war, as I said yesterday. But obviously, this time, the strategy he's following, not an open-ended war, not like dumb war, if you want to call it. He's not going to shoot just 1,000 missiles on Israel just to prove a break right now. If you notice, he's only targeting jamming devices here and there, targeting, somewhere that, and he's suffering from a lot of casualties and, call it. And the reason
Man,
is
you keep cutting out. Finish off, but you keep cutting out.
Yeah, sure. So I think I clarify my point. It's just he in this letter, and when I get
so that's okay. So well, yeah, no, you gave a good analysis, and I like what you said that he's indirectly joining the war by saying this. That's a pretty strong comment. Like Hadi, would you agree? If you could send me the translated version, Hadi, after your comment now, it'd be good. But would you agree with the statement that he's already hinting that he's joined as well as joined the war?
I don't. I mean, we already know if they're gonna join. They already have been joined. They already lost 40 members and soldiers, so that's like kind of there. But I think it's also indirectly saying that, like I said, they are involved in what happens for Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa and the Palestinian people and the Palestinian cause and the people of Gaza. So it's kind of like the first message from him that we are involved. So do not separate us from what's happening in Gaza. So I think that's kind of the message. So whatever happens there, it also affects us because now he's saying that our soldiers are in the name of Jerusalem. That's like the first one. And that was pretty clear for everyone before, but I think he's making it more clear now for the supporter base. And for the fact he made it handwritten, that's very, very, very important for like us in the communities. And for him to do that, that's very it has a lot of meaning. Yeah,
so Jackson, I see you just jumped in. We were just talking about a letter that Hezbollah leader Nasrallah put out to his put out publicly, calling his dead soldiers Jerusalem. I think what was the exact statement, Hadi? I've just lost the tweet. There it is. Yeah. Martyrs on the way to Jerusalem, which many and that kind of surprised me. I tweeted it, but I didn't know it was that significant. But that was his first public statement since the war started. He hasn't given any televised speech. And then Hadi was telling me that the people analyzing this, including people in the community, as a call for war against Israel, whether it's now, it's an inevitable war, but obviously the timing is going to be now. And another person I was analyzing it just before he jumped in said that it's an indicator that Hezbollah has already joined the war. Now the only discussion is to what extent. And then we also saw a report from this morning. We're talking about that there's that the Israeli military requested from parliament to assassinate Hezbollah's leader Nasrallah, but that request was denied. That came in this morning from a credible source, one of the big outlets in Israel. I want to get your thoughts on that, and obviously what we've seen in Kuwait, the alert that was given to the the Iranian-backed group that attacked Dubai a few years ago, and Saudi a few years ago as well, putting out a warning, a threat to U.S. forces in Kuwait and in the UAE. I want to get your thoughts on that, Jackson.
Mario, Layla is here. You asked for
Yeah,
her, so I'm
I'll
just
bring
letting
her
you
up.
know.
Yeah, thanks.
You've also got about 5 people with their hands up,
Yeah,
FYI.
sure. I can see the hands up. Don't worry.
My thoughts on it are, they're definitely, Hamas, Hezbollah, these are definitely 100% terrorist groups, and I would never sympathize with their resistance and with their struggle. And 100% definitely agree with everything the U.S. State Department and the CIA says about them, because they're 100% accurate. And I think that, this is already a war. Hezbollah and the Iranians are going to do whatever's in their best interests. And my opinions haven't changed on that. But, with these Israeli parliamentary Knesset leaders who are calling for assassinations and whatnot, I'll comment on that. Their attempts are going to be fruitless. These men are well hidden, both in Palestine and those in Lebanon. And there's not a, I mean, if you look at Hamas, they've calculated what, like JDAM guided missiles, like the furthest they can penetrate, and they built their tunnels 15 meters under it. They've prepared for this for years. They know full well what the Israelis want to do. They want to eradicate all. But the thing is that we all have to remember, this last thing I'll say for now. What has Israel done since October 7th? They bombed schools, they bombed hospitals, they bombed UN facilities, they bombed journalists, they bomb civilian homes, they bomb churches, they bomb mosques. They're bombing everything except for Hamas, even though they claim this war is against Hamas, because they can't reach Hamas. They don't know where Hamas is, and where they do know for sure that they can't reach them in those underground tunnels. So this is going to be a real shit show for them when they do decide to launch this invasion. But they keep delaying, because they don't have enough defenses and enough missiles, and that's what they're trying to build up.
Craig, I know you disagree with this. I'd love you to comment, but also give us your thoughts on the letter from Hezbollah and what that means as well, and obviously the comments by Jackson.
Yeah, so I mean, first in regards to the letter, I don't know the politics of the region, but I can certainly tell you that what else would you expect him to say, right? I mean, Hezbollah has a group of very motivated fighters that are very motivated in doing what they're doing, which is killing Jews and trying to destroy Israel. And so you can't expect him to say anything. It's like Vladimir Putin trotting out nuclear weapons over and over and over again and not doing anything, right? It's just kind of like, it's kind of par for the course, right? This is what they're supposed to do. In regards to Jackson's comments, I mean, with all due respect, nobody knows what's on the other end of those airstrikes, right? Are there Hamas fighters there? We don't know. So you can't label it one way or the other. That's completely disingenuous to an intellectual-based argument or even a conversation. If you don't know that Israel is striking maybe entrance to tunnels, maybe they're striking groups of fighters. There are drone videos that we're seeing where you see thermal images of Hamas fighters that are walking around or getting, knocked on the head with drone strikes. So if you want to have a real reality-based conversation, then we have to engage in reality. We can't engage in things that are not based in facts. And if we're going to talk about what Hamas is prepared for, first of all, you don't have to actually strike the tunnels to actually get to them. You need to strike the entrance and the exit. So I always use the comparison for fox hunting. You don't actually, if you're hunting fox and they dig deep, you don't dig down the middle of the tunnel. You flush and then you chase with hounds. You don't actually go in there. You send in terriers through the entrance and you use your fox hounds to chase down the fox if they get out. And so you don't have to actually destroy these tunnels that are buried, however deep they might be. You just need to destroy the entrance and the exit to those tunnels. So I think that the idea that Israel is somehow at a disadvantage here, I think that they have held their fire. I think that they have 300,000 men and women standing on the border. And I'll simply say this, to put that in context, that is nearly twice as many troops we invaded Iraq with in 2003. So that's how much Israel has stacked on the border right now with Gaza. That is not like some small little force. That is nearly twice the number that Russia went into Ukraine with, and it is nearly twice the number that we went into Iraq with in 2003. So this is not a force that is by any means like weak or incapable of doing the mission. They're just trying to do the mission properly with proper logistics, proper planning, proper ISR, proper signet, and then they will move forward at their discretion. So I think, again, we
Yeah,
have to have a reality-based conversation here.
yeah.
I'll just say in response to
Go ahead.
that, because I'm all in favor of having a reality-based conversation, as you put it, and being intellectually honest, as you also put it, and that's why I said that they've only bombed the hospitals, schools, UN facilities, journalists, mosques, church, so on and so forth, because that's exactly what's happened. Israel's a terrorist state.
Mario,
They're a
I'd like
bunch.
to respond to that.
Sure,
Yeah, just hold on.
I'll let Noga respond right after you're done, Jackson. Go ahead.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead,
you
Jackson.
can respond when I'm done talking, woman. So
Okay,
Israel's a
so you don't
This guys.
call
Yeah,
people woman.
listen.
Okay, mate,
Yeah,
do
so
not ever talk like that, yeah?
Guys.
As soon as you
just
come...
hold on. Yeah, so hold on. No, so no, let's just keep it polite. You portray yourself as a polite, intellectual man, so let's just be kind. So go ahead.
Jackson, you got to unmute bottom left corner.
at hand before I was so rudely interrupted. Basically, Israel is a terrorist state, and they should be dealt with as such. Unfortunately, the U.S. deals with terrorists by funding them. That's what Israel does as well. They fund Al Qaeda, Al Nusra, Jaish al Islam, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in Syria against the Bashar al-Assad government. But I'm of the belief that we should take a more humane route. I think we should arrest Netanyahu and all of these crazy members of the Knesset. We should send them to the International Criminal Court and prosecute them for crimes against humanity. But the last conversation Craig was putting forward about how strong the 300,000 reservists are. I mean, Craig, you talk with a lot of reservists because they grew up next to me. Some of these kids, they get called up from going to school at USC in Los Angeles. And I'll be the first to say that these are not well-trained men. These are a bunch of homosexual TikTok reservists that are being called up to the front to go and invade.
Yeah, so why don't you just try to watch your manners there, Jackson?
I'll let you push back Zev and Noga afterwards. I know that.
Well, it's true. I mean, I can call them gay if you want. They identify as such. I don't want to offend them and call them straight or anything. And
Is this even a real conversation anymore?
Yes, basically they're going to be going. They're going to be going in there, and they're going to be going up against the most passionate, strong-spirited, patriotic men on the face of the earth right now, who have been preparing for this with the Iranians and Hezbollah for years. And I don't think it's going to go well.
Noga, I'll let you respond, and Zev obviously has a lot of things to respond to, a lot of comments made. Noga?
Well, now that we know what a sexist Jackson is, and that didn't take very much, I don't want to assume his humanity at this point, or her, or its, but I would like to make a couple of distinctions that he seems to have forgotten, and maybe he was asleep that day. The reason why we're in this mess is because 2.5 weeks ago, Hamas murderous terrorists went into 22 different Israeli villages and slaughtered babies and raped women. And I'm not going to go through the whole list of the things, and just suffice it to say that they also managed to burn quite a few children. The reason why we're here right now and having this discussion and having this war is because is because terrorists and idiots like Jackson who support them try to kill Jews. And Israel takes it. Israel takes it to the extent that we have the Iron been in charge of the Gaza Strip. And I'd like to remind you once again, was provoked. And I hope that now that you woke up, you understand that. But more than that, I need you to understand what we're doing is attack in hospitals and in schools. That is what we attack. That is what we're doing is attacking children when you have to understand these are expensive, very sophisticated bombs that so far up your ass. I don't know where to start.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm done. Zionism is an offense.
Let him respond. Let him respond, and I'd like to, yeah.
On October 7th, and like the Palestinian people haven't been genocided and forcibly removed. Thousand tons of explosives on Gaza since October. And that's almost the equivalent of how many tons of explosives that the United States dropped on women and children. 44% of the Gaza population is under the age of 14. And you can just go and slaughter every person at a church, hospital, journalist, whatever in sight. Palestine and the Israelis giving up the land that
just
to the conversation.
No, well, because I'll explain to you how it's relevant, because you came in here talking about Zionism and so forth.
You guys had me muted. So we're having got slaughtered, and you want to have a semantics debate.
Because no. No, you've come in here. Listen, with all due respect, you've come in here acting like some type of an expert, which is fine. I'm not here to question your credentials. Mr. Hinkle, please.
All I'm
Mr.
saying
Hinkle,
is that
so no. So I didn't interrupt you. Please show some respect. Don't interrupt me. You've come in here making these ridiculous claims with no empirical evidence whatsoever. You don't even know what the word Zion means, and you're referencing Zionism. What does Palestine mean? What does Palestine mean? You don't. Somebody else. I need a cigarette.
Okay, listen. So I don't take kindly to this notion that I don't know what these terms mean. But
Well, you don't.
at the end of how do I know? Because I've read the Bible.
No, you don't know.
So
If you read the Bible, you would know what the word Zion means, and
I
clearly
know
you
what the
don't.
word Zion means. We're having
What
a
does Zion mean?
conversation. We're having a conversation about war crimes that are taking place today, and you want to have a semantics debate.
Absolutely, because you couldn't answer the most basic question of all questions because you don't know. It's just clear. Just you can concede the point. You can concede that you don't
has
know. There's
read the
nothing wrong with
Bible, they
not
know.
knowing.
If anyone has read the Bible, they know what Zion means. You don't have to know what Novorossiya is to be able to talk about the conflict in Ukraine. Journalists, churches, mosques, etc. Well, what's so unsubstantiated?
I'm going to take the opportunity to do that now, and I won't go into what I did yesterday. Don't worry, Mario. Jackson, you will be aware of, it's a very particular part of the Russian Empire that was from the latter half of the 20th, 19th century, right? That's very different. Second, the situation between Palestine and Hamas is very nuanced. It's not simply a case of the Israelis wanting to go in there to kill all Palestinians. At least that's what the Israelis claim. Third, the Hamas entity, as they're known, is not exactly wholeheartedly supported by every Palestinian. The reports and the polls that have been done in the past 3 to 4 years have shown that only about 50% of Palestinians support them. Now, I will agree with you very, very loosely when I say that why would the Palestinians have an alignment, an investment of faith in Hamas? Because they feel that the political movement, the political arm of the process has let them down. They feel that the Israelis have continuously encroached upon them, that they have been kept in an open-air prison, and that there has generally been a poor provision of their rights, of their lifestyle, and so on and so forth. But I think it's a little bit strong to then go on to say some of the other very outlandish things that you do about Zionism and so on. As usual, there's an extremity that we like to go to because it introduces controversiality. It introduces likes and clickbait and everything else. So, yeah. So, Mary, I haven't spoken since I got onto stage. Jackson's hogged the mic for a while, so I wouldn't mind doing so.
Yeah, go ahead, Piotr. Yeah, I was just saying your mic is cutting out, but go ahead. You're making a point.
Okay, so what I just want to say is that I think we need to be more delicate in the way that we deliver our points. And I also think that we need to be a little bit more conscious of making direct comparisons to Ukraine and Russia versus Israel and Palestine. The situation in this goes back to the Balfour.
Piotr, you keep cutting out.
Arguably before. To simply put it down to Israel versus Palestine is a bit of a simplistic take. And I would prefer that if we have this nuanced conversation, that it is just that, nuanced, not simplistic.
So Jackson, I'll let you respond. And Jackson, I want to kind of link to something else that I'd love to hear Noga's thoughts afterwards, yours, Jackson's, and Ben's. And that's the concept of collective punishment, which is something that's been heavily debated. I was waiting to have that conversation later in the week, but since we're debating things now and we're discussing what's going on in Gaza, I'd love to get different perspectives on the blockade for aid that's going on, the blockade of water that is harming the citizens with the goal of, I think the goal, best way to describe it, is to weaken Hamas and to release the hostages. But Jackson, I'll let you respond to Piotr first, and I'd love to get Noga's thoughts on the idea of collective punishment.
Before he responds, I don't want to start the debate or anything. I just really want to know something. Jackson, did you? I might misunderstand you or something. I don't want to start the debate. Just say yes or no. Did you say that you believe Hezbollah and Hamas are terrorist organizations?
Well, as an American citizen, I think I'll be prosecuted if I say otherwise. So I'm going to go with the correct answer for my own freedoms and say that I agree 100% with the State Department.
All right, good. Thank you.
Anyways, to get to Piotr's statement, I think there is, obviously it's not the same conflict at all, but there's a lot of comparisons you can draw between Ukraine and here. And what I'll say is that, yeah, I mean, I've seen some polls say 50%, 30% people. I've seen polls say 90% people in Gaza who support Hamas, and we don't really know. But you have to understand, I mean, these people, it is collective punishment by these Zionist terrorists, and that's why they probably, so many of them support Hamas, and it's again, I can't be 100% transparent and honest because Hamas is labeled a terrorist organization in the United States, so I can't say everything. But what I will say is that this previous speaker, I don't know your name, the woman, you said something about how Hamas went in and murdered. Proof whatsoever. I mean, of course they went in. We have proof of that. Of course they engaged in firefighting. We have proof of that. Of course they engaged in firefighting and around civilians, and they took civilian hostages. We have proof of that. And I'm sure they that, you know, found themselves in that position. Military or security services, police, because I mean, where's the proof? Every time you know, crossfire. Last thing I'll say is heading, you know, people. I mean, it's just all so.
I know politely. Hamas put videos of their assault. Hamas did put videos of their assaults online, which is how we year-old use her parents' phones to take media for all of their dead, which is why of the dead and captured terrorists. We're not going to put them on display for all to see, but you're welcome to come and see the newly dug graves. By the way, we haven't even and we can't get
I mean, listen. I mean, listen. I understand where Mr. Hinkle's.
Okay, cheers. Yeah, so Jackson, so just to the terrorist, the way that Hamas is qualified then. So if you're, relatively well informed, I'm not going to call you an expert, if you're relatively well informed, what would you look for in a post-war scenario? Would you expect Hamas to still be in the picture? Would you expect Israel to What would you look for as a way to govern Gaza / West Bank, or is that not something that you think is easy enough to deal with and tell because of the unpredictability of the situation?
Well, I'm an American. Out Hamas as they claim. I think that's laughable. This woman, she's of Hamas soldiers. Videos, and they're all across the internet. You can look at them yourselves, of Israelis, non-combatants who are pissing on the dead bodies of what I presume that's a proper way to treat prisoners of war or the dead bodies of warriors and they evidence to the contrary of what she put forward, that they treat Hamas captured fighters so well.
Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, and it's curious that when you talk that he came up with a statement today in response to reporters' questions saying that he is not certain of the Palestinian number of casualties, and the exact quote was, "I don't know if they're telling the truth about it." So I think we have to be a little bit more balanced here, Mr. Hinkle.
Tweets was perfect timing. I was just
and also, I mean, I'd be curious because I do know that you are I believe you call yourself a mega communist. Then why is it that the vast majority of the mega people, and I'm sure you're going to say it's the Zionist influence, why is it the vast majority of those who support mega coming out saying, no, Israel can't do this, Israel can't do that?
First of all, I mean, I'll respond to those things quickly as I can, but it's yeah, I'm definitely not a Joe Biden supporter, as you know. And you said my messiah, Donald Trump. Donald Trump's not my messiah. I don't think Donald Trump's I don't think he's a perfect or anything near that. I mean, he killed Qasem Soleimani for starters. That was a huge L. But when it comes to the statistics of dead civilians in Gaza, I do shelter envoy. So yeah, I think the number of dead is probably way higher. But I will say Netanyahu made a huge mistake, and it was a categorical failure that the Al-Aqsa flood resulted. They bombed the oldest Christian church in the hospital.
So Sarah, if you can unmute, you can't unmute. We can't hear you. Just unmute. So till then, she's not able. She's got the same glitch.
So I
Oh,
think
no, hold
that
on. She's unmuted. Yeah. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sarah.
No, go ahead.
Sarah, go ahead, please. I think she can't hear me, Zev. Can you tell her to go ahead? Can you tell her to go ahead? I think she has a glitch where she can't hear us.
Hey, Sarah, go ahead. I'll hold on.
Yeah, I'm just feeling like this isn't a debate. It's more of like rage baiting, saying a whole lot of things that will get people really angry and upset so we can argue over things that really are just facts or not facts. So the facts are that we have all because they wore GoPros and they recorded themselves. Because Hamas is not a reliable reporter, and we all understand. Israeli perspective, we had to bury 1,500 people, and it was to dig graves because of how difficult it was to by thousands and thousands day after day. It's not even reflected in how and that they wanted attention to the Palestinian issue. How could Israel not? And now they want the picture. Piles and piles of body, and we would see those pictures. And those pictures don't exist.
Yeah.
That Hamas fighters went into Israel, did the most heinous then saying also that it happened, you know, in these well surveilled areas, and then not being able to show a bunch of terrorists that should be prosecuted
You know
at The
what's
Hague.
sick? It's
Go to Noga if you don't mind, Jackson. Noga, I'm
Can I
glad.
ask a quick?
is uncanny, to be honest, and is uncanny, to be honest, and sounds like he's really convinced, which makes me think he's sounds like he's really convinced, which makes me think he's either brainwashed or, you know, being paid. But terrorists booby trapped a lot of the bodies, and they're still there 2 weeks after, because we need to find a way to get still burnt children. So you mentioned Hiroshima. Which denies 4,000 years of recognized historical
Okay,
but
well, I'll
unlike
just.
in every other, unlike in every other conflict in the world, and responding to other incidents. It's devoid of reality. It's honestly
'70 years ago that wasn't the case. It's as insane as it's as insane as claiming. And she shook hands with them, had coffee and tea with them.
to go all the way in Gaza and export the to Egypt or Jordan, which are now facing
listen to them, tailor to, adjust their calculation. The peace isn't built on any. The peace isn't built on any. Is not built on a. But that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, you mentioned the peace agreement. was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, let alone after the 73 war. The Middle East gets utilize the Arab streets and the pressure I'm discussing because absolutely Israel should have terrorist attacks. They absolutely have a right to defend themselves. But you also have to understand that this new and now in Lebanon working with Russia and the potential Chinese involvement now alters. So you have to look at this from that context as well. From a 30,000-foot view, what I believe is going just discussed.
So I've got a separate question. Veerpass and Jackson. We were discussing earlier what happens next if Israel does go ahead, which is looking more and more likely. From the north, they go all the way to the south to try to achieve their mission. From the north, they go all the way to the south to try to achieve their mission of ending Hamas for good. There was an argument made earlier. I think it was you, George, that made the argument. They're just going to.
Well, first I'll just say I agree with a lot of what George said about the nature of the Arab states and Russia's position, and as well as Iran in this whole matter. And political crisis Netanyahu's already found himself in before this began. As for the eradication in Gaza is going to probably want to or will pick up arms, to fight against Israel if they come in, and on a hospital or something. Whether or not you previously held allegiances to Hamas or not, you're probably going to after organization. But you also have to reckon with reality, and that's the reality for these people.
I want to go back to a couple of things. There is good and evil in the world. And we've seen evil occur on October 7th. Doesn't matter what you think, which side was good, which they're going to eradicate who they feel missile batteries. That's because actionable intelligence is stating that we are seeing movement in Iran. They're going and when they're going, probably not the H out, is going to be some level of movement. The containment effort that the U.S. if it does go into this long ground war, which it will, booby traps and EFPs and a lot of other things that will be going on, they are concerned that will a missile come over and strike Israel. So therefore, you're going to see the U.S. posture in a manner to say, don't even think of stepping foot in the ballistic chamber. Don't even go near it. The other thing that's important is that, we talk about the freedom of speech, and Mario, you do put it in here and for people to do. I just think until you're willing to pick up a gun and stand up against good and evil, your opinion really doesn't matter at this point.
Jackson, did you want to respond to this before I ask the next question?
Just that I agree with the sentiment that also there's going to be a really big problem waiting for. I mean, we talked
but
about
you
it a
don't
little.
stand.
He's saying you don't.
Yeah, but you're not standing against evil. You're not standing against evil. What you're
Who's
doing
evil?
is who's evil. Coming to fluff it a little bit is not really seeing the pictures of the attack, a well-coordinated attack, a well-organized with all right, and it doesn't matter where the ideology your nation, just like I've done for you to would say, hey, I want you to defend your land and don't call them names and don't you're an American and you keep
No, you
talking
just
about here, but that's not what
But
this is
where?
about.
Why won't you say? No, where have you been? Because you were going on this. No, where have you been? Because you were going on this long diatribe. Tribe, let me answer. Okay, so you talked about how by sacrificing your body parts, brown kids in Afghanistan or innocent brown kids in Syria. For-profit war, and I mean, like.
Excuse me, if I may, one thing, and you said something that I think
Well, I'll just say I'm an American citizen.
House to even come up on stage and to use the Palestinian
what I condemn. And this was a want to be clear. I mean, the survivor, she's very brave. Tragic event like this, and it was tragic.
All others. Survivors to this one, who, by the way, didn't say what.
You believe they killed him, but you don't know exactly how. And certain things, whether they happen or not. So from those things, would you condemn it just based on those things that Hamas fighters?
First, and everyone said condemn it, condemn it, condemn it, and then Trump launched airstrikes with the French and the UK on Syria.
Comments on what you've heard.
Down the ground. That's a school. That's an apartment building. That's the orchard between the two where they just launched. between the humanity of an Israeli pilot who was
on October 7th. They intentionally killed civilians when they were facing them.
Video proof to back up the things that he was saying. It's just laughable. It's like
absurd.
It's
No,
like
it's
laughable. It's like
absurd.
It's
No,
like
it's
oh
absurd.
my god, oh my god. What I will, what I,
that proved the
can we
Syrians
just
used
yeah. Gas his own people. That was a lie. So um it's just the Israel what they need to Israel what they need to do is they so the only people who haven't called
to the dash cam, and that we have, local CCTV. This isn't like, someone on their security gate. We see them killing people as they enter the gate so they can open the gate and get into the kibbutz. Right? So when you see this, do you attribute it to it?
everyone, you know, I support the police, but that was crazy. He just choked them out with the.
Day, the reason why he was convicted is because the defense and that specific case was not able to bring on a medical expert that would say finish. We know that he did not die of a fentanyl overdose.
That's you know, I wasn't held at the border or anything. Yes, you're right. Our Savior, our Lord and Savior. Hours after the events unfolded, there was security personnel firing. There was security personnel firing at the Hamas fighters. The moment. And the last thing I'll say is, okay, because people died in Israel. Israeli security forces who each and every day of this week
as well. But this is a person out of his way not to see any of it. So don't always come in because we have respect for the people.
As in Gaza? Is that what you're saying?
So you didn't hear what I said.
The world, the Ukrainian Russians. I mean, you know, their motive